David Ghantt was an ordinary poor man, but he used to handle cash for 16 hours a day, while his own pocket was always empty. In fact, David was a supervisor of an armored car for a security firm called Loomis Fargo, whose job was to transfer millions of dollars between banks. He spent all day guarding this money, yet his own salary was barely $8 per hour. How long could he keep strangling his dreams under the heavy blanket of honesty? One day, tired of this honest life, David decided to do something wrong. This is the interesting story of the 1997 Loomis Fargo bank heist, in which an ordinary man forced the FBI to launch an international manhunt, and this very story became the basis for the 2016 Hollywood film Masterminds. Astonishingly, David Ghantt himself even acted in the film based on his own story, but unfortunately he didn't get paid for it. David Ghantt was a retired Gulf War veteran who had defended his country and was now working as a supervisor for Loomis Fargo's armored car company, handling cash all day with empty pockets and the burden of family responsibilities on his shoulders. He worked 75 to 80 hours a week, earning barely $5 per hour. He was fed up with his routine. Loneliness and the frustration of not doing anything big were eating him up inside. These circumstances created a strange restlessness in David's heart, and eventually he began having bad thoughts. As soon as the idea of dishonesty entered his mind, temptation opened a new path for him, and that path's name was Kelly Campbell. Kelly also worked at Loomis Fargo. She was a bold, sharp, and mysterious girl. During their job at Loomis Fargo, she somehow became friends with David, and they often met even after office hours. Their friendship was so deep that even after Kelly quit her job, they still kept meeting. One day, Kelly introduced David to her friend Steve Chambers. Steve was a small-time criminal who always dreamed of making quick money. When Steve learned that David was a Loomis Fargo armored vehicle supervisor, a wicked idea was born in his mind, an idea to steal the money. But for this plan to succeed, David had to join them. So both of them began trying to convince David. David Ghantt, whose intentions were already faltering, found Steve's idea like giving a push to a falling wall. At first David was terrified, as he had never done anything wrong in his life before, but Steve's manner persuaded him. He showed David dreams of living a happy, luxurious life. David's frustration, Kelly's support, and Steve's greed all brought him to a point of no return. Then the planning of this master plan began. Since Steve was just a petty criminal, Kelly had no experience, and David was even worse. Their plan was something that would make a professional thief laugh. The plan was simple. On the night of October 4th, 1997, after his shift, David would stay late in the vault, turn off the security cameras, steal the cassette tapes, load the company van with cash, and flee. The plan was that after the theft, David would immediately flee to Mexico with $50,000, the legal limit allowed to cross the US border at that time. The rest of the cash would remain with Steve Chambers, and once things cooled down, David would return and the money would be equally distributed. But there was a big flaw in this plan. Why would Steve share the stolen money later when David had already fled with just $50,000? But David was blinded by greed and never thought about it. Finally, the night arrived. On October 4th of 1997, at 6 p.m., David sent home the trainee staff who were with him. Now he was alone with responsibility for the vault. Scared and nervous, David went into the vault and, according to the plan, disabled 2 security cameras and removed the cassette that contained all the recordings. But he forgot to turn off a 3rd camera hidden in a corner of the vault. This 3rd camera recorded every moment of the Loomis Fargo robbery for the next several hours. Completely unaware of this, David began hauling out cash from the vault. But here was another problem. He wasn't counting and transferring cash this time. He had to empty the entire vault all at once and completely alone. Most of the money was in $20 bills, around 800,000 notes or more than 8,000 bundles. Loading so many bundles into the van alone took a lot of time. For the next 2 hours, he kept filling the van with cash. After loading around $17.03 million, he didn't even realize he had pulled off the second largest cash robbery in American history. After loading all the cash into the van, David danced with joy, and his dance too was recorded by the third camera. The next morning, when the other Loomis Fargo employees arrived and tried to open the vault, they found the vault keys missing. Police were called, and since only David Ghantt was absent from the office, he immediately became the prime suspect. When the security camera footage was checked, suspicion turned to certainty, and David's dance added insult to injury. In the footage, David could be seen repeatedly messaging someone on his pager during the theft, proving he wasn't working alone. Police began searching for David and his accomplices. 2 days later, after searching the entire city, FBI agents found the cash van abandoned in a forest. Inside were about $3 million in cash that had likely been left due to its weight and lack of time. Both CCTV cassettes were also found in the van. Now David and his accomplices still had around $14 million, mostly in unmarked $20 bills, meaning they couldn't easily be traced if spent. David had already fled to Mexico with $50,000 according to the plan, living in a luxury beach resort. Police and FBI published ads in newspapers offering a $500,000 reward for information about the robbery. They appealed to citizens to report anyone around them who suddenly seemed to have come into a lot of money. This campaign brought in many calls, most just from people hoping to get lucky, but one call put the stalled investigation back on track. A man informed police that his neighbor suddenly had a lot of money. That neighbor was Steve Chambers, the mastermind of the plan. The FBI quietly began surveillance and found that Steve couldn't control himself. He and his wife Michelle had bought a big expensive house, a new BMW, and were spending lavishly. FBI checked their bank accounts and found that since October 4, they had suddenly deposited a lot of money. Their suspicion was confirmed when a bank teller told them the money was deposited in $20 bills, and Michelle even asked how much money could be deposited without being reported to the feds. Now the FBI was certain Steve and Michelle were involved, but they stayed quiet to find the other accomplices, especially David. Just 10 days into the investigation, everything began to unfold. To dig deeper, the FBI tapped Steve Chambers' phone. In one call, David Gantt's name caught their attention. The call between Steve and a man named Mike McKinney revealed they were plotting to kill David. Steve, blinded by the huge amount of money, wanted to have David killed in Mexico to keep all the money for himself. The FBI arrested Mike McKinney, who immediately confessed to the entire plan. He revealed David's location in Mexico and explained how after stealing the cash they drove the van to the parking lot of Reynolds printing press, where they transferred the cash to another vehicle. Ironically, Steve worked at this printing press and didn't even bother to take the van to an unknown location. Since they had very little time, too much cash, and a sloppy plan, they left $3 million in the van and parked it in a forest right next to Steve's office, just a few kilometers from the Loomis Fargo warehouse. Within the first 10 days, the police and FBI had identified the entire group, but they waited 5 months to gather solid evidence. On March 1, 1998, David Ghantt was arrested in Mexico. The next day, Steve Chambers, his wife Michelle, and Kelly Campbell were arrested in Charlotte, North Carolina. The FBI recovered 88% of the stolen money, while the remaining cash had been spent by Steve on luxury items. Steve Chambers was sentenced to 11 years in prison, and David Ghantt got 7 years. David was also billed for the missing $3 million, even though he never spent it. In 2016, a film called Masterminds was made on this story. The producers hired David Ghantt as a consultant, but didn't pay him because legally any money he received would go directly to paying off his debt. At that time, David was working as a construction laborer and said, "Even if I work my whole life, I can never repay this debt." Today, David Ghantt lives in Jacksonville, Florida, with his wife and children, working as a construction worker. He maintains a presence on social media and uses it to let people learn from his mistakes.